Welcome to LV Scary Stories. Tonight, we bring you chilling tales that blur the line between the living and the dead. These stories are more than just ghostly encounters. They are deeply rooted in culture, tradition, and beliefs that may be unfamiliar to many. Within them, spirits linger. The past refuses to stay buried, and fate unfolds in ways beyond our understanding. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for stories that will make you question what truly follows us from the other side. Story number 1. Back in 2013, my wife and I, along with our 3 kids, moved into a house located at a T intersection. Our house faced the street that led directly toward us. There's a belief that living in a house location like this brings bad luck, misfortune, and paranormal encounters. After moving in, my wife and I started arguing a lot. Before, she never had any issues with my drinking, but after we moved in, she began to have a problem with it. About 2 months after living in that house, I attended a distant relative's funeral. The funeral in my culture is more like a social gathering or a party. It was one of those funerals where it didn't really matter whether you showed up or not. No one would notice. I was mainly there to drink, hang out with my friends, and take shots with 2 young ladies. After that, everything became a blur. I vaguely remember my friends dropping me off at home. I started arguing with my wife and vomiting everywhere, expecting her to clean up after me. I don't remember much after that, but apparently, I was breaking things and eventually passed out on the floor. That night I woke up to someone tugging at my right leg. When I opened my eyes slightly, I thought I saw the shadows of 2 of my kids standing at my feet, but they weren't my kids. These 2 shadows grabbed my foot and started dragging me across the living room in a circle while laughing. What was even stranger was the dark figure standing in the corner, watching the 2 shadows drag me. It was pitch black, and I couldn't make out who or what it was. It was like a shadow just standing there. I was so exhausted that I drifted back to sleep, but I could still hear the laughter and giggling. The next morning, I woke up in the hallway bathroom, lying next to the toilet. When I looked at the floor, I saw my vomit smeared across it. There was a trail of vomit, as if I had been dragged into the bathroom, and I still had vomit on my shirt, face, and in my hair. I got up, took a shower, and drank a gallon of water. Then I started making phone calls to find my wife and kids. I found out that my wife had taken them to her sister's house because they were afraid of me. She said they wouldn't return until I sobered up. When I went back to work on Monday, I asked my friends who those 2 young ladies were, the ones I had been drinking with at the funeral. My friends looked at me strangely and said there were no ladies drinking with us at the funeral. It had just been us guys. But I clearly remembered 2 ladies sitting with us, constantly offering me shots. My family and I lived in that house for 8 months before finally moving out. After we left, I stopped drinking completely, and the arguments between my wife and me stopped as well. I guess it's true. If your house is at a T intersection, especially if it faces the oncoming road, you're more likely to experience misfortune and paranormal encounters. Maybe those 2 ladies followed me home from the funeral. Like people always say, funerals aren't just for the living to grieve. The dead attend them too. Thank you for listening. Story number 2. There was a grandma in our clan who had passed away. She had a son whom she lived with, but her 3 daughters were married and lived out of state. This happened back in 2002, when not many of us had cell phones. She was found after suffering a stroke and passed away that same day. Since her death was so sudden, her daughters couldn't attend the dressing ceremony. It's a tradition that when you die, your loved ones will dress you in funeral clothing. I was very close to this family, so I was one of the people who helped put funeral clothing on the grandma. My kids called her Tai Ka, which means Grandma Ka. We were very close to her. She would even give my kids money whenever we visited. It was heartbreaking. Here's the thing. If you help dress the deceased for their funeral, you must wash your hands afterward as part of a cleansing ritual to ensure that spirits don't follow you home. After we finished dressing her, one of the aunts asked me about the herbs I was using. I got distracted by our conversation, and when everyone else washed their hands, I forgot to wash mine. After that, I drove straight home. The next morning, I woke up early to make coffee for my husband before he left for work at 5 a.m. Once he was gone, I lay on the couch watching TV and eventually dozed off. At 6 a.m., my daughter Lou was already awake and sitting on the sofa by my feet, watching TV. That's when there was a knock at the door. I told Lou to go open it, thinking it was my mother since she had mentioned visiting that day. I didn't expect her to arrive so early. Lou was only 6 years old, so when she opened the door, she just stood there staring outside. I asked her who it was, and she replied, "It's Grandma Ka." I asked again, and she repeated, "It's Grandma Ka." I told her to stop lying and to close the door. She did. After that, I couldn't go back to sleep. At 10 a.m., my mother arrived. She sat on the sofa, talking to me about women's health. After about 10 minutes, she suddenly said she wanted to go to the store and insisted that I take all 3 kids with us. She told me not to say anything, just to go. While I was driving, she finally spoke up. My mother told me that she had seen Grandma Ka peeking out from the bathroom. Then she asked, "Did you wash your hands after helping dress Grandma Ka?" That's when I realized I hadn't. That day, we stayed at my parents' house until my husband came home from work. Then, we had my father-in-law come and sweep our house. After that, nothing strange happened again, and Grandma Ka's funeral went smoothly without any further issues. Thank you for listening. Story number 3. This next story might be a bit confusing, as the details are complex and scattered. When I originally told it in my native language, my audience understood it easily. However, translating it into English was challenging due to cultural and religious differences. I did my best to make it as clear as possible. Also, chemotherapy has taken a toll on my mind, and I've been dealing with chemo brain fog, so telling a longer story like this one was especially difficult, but I hope you enjoy it. My families are from Southeast Asia. When my uncle was young, he was a tall and handsome man with many girlfriends, according to my father. In fact, 2 of my uncle's girlfriends committed suicide when he got married. One committed suicide by hanging and the other by eating poisonous leaves. I remember when we lived together in one house in Laos, strange things would often happen outside my uncle and his wife's room at night or early in the morning. You could hear a woman laughing and giggling faintly outside their room. My uncle would go crazy. At the time, I didn't know that my uncle was being haunted by a ghost. We came to America in 2003, and for a while, my uncle was fine. But then, he started getting sick again. That's when I heard my aunt, my uncle's wife, complain that they had begun hearing the same eerie voice outside their home. It's the same voice they heard back when we're still in Laos. When my uncle got scared and started shouting, the female voice would only laugh. Growing up, my grandparents always said I looked more like my uncle than my father because I was tall like him. They often joked that I should be careful and not end up like my uncle, or my girlfriend might commit suicide and come back to haunt me. My uncle was a sick man and eventually passed away in 2011. The family did a 3-day and nights funeral for him. We usually start the funeral on Friday to Sunday, and then burial is on Monday. I attended the funeral for the first 2 days and nights, but on the last day, I had to return to work since I worked the night shift at a warehouse. One thing I forgot to mention is that during my uncle's funeral, Two elderly people told the clan leaders they could see spirits crying over my uncle's corpse. Sometimes the crying would turn into laughter. At least two female ghosts were mourning him. For some reason, no one else could hear or see them, except for those two elders. Monday morning was the burial day. I got off work, went straight to the funeral home, helped pack up, and carried my uncle to the hearse. A short while later, we arrived at the cemetery. After performing a few traditional practices and rituals, they lowered my uncle into the ground. Once the burial was complete, the elders and clan leaders insisted that we return to my uncle's house to do the hand-washing ritual. It is a religious belief that after burying a loved one, everyone must return to the house where the deceased lived and wash their hands with warm water. Afterward, they must dry their hands over a fire to cleanse themselves of any lingering bad spirits or negative energies from the cemetery. I was exhausted from work, and it was almost noon. I needed to go home, eat, shower, and sleep since I had another night shift. So instead of going to my uncle's house to wash my hands, I went straight home. At the time, I thought traditions were just traditions. Beliefs were just beliefs. The next few nights at work, everything seemed fine. I didn't hear or see anything unusual. On Friday morning, I got home from my night shift work. Since I had Friday and Saturday off, I needed to go to bed right away so I could wake up at noon and go fishing with my cousins. As soon as I got home, I took a quick shower and went to bed. I had just laid down. It was hot, so I didn't cover myself with a blanket. Suddenly, I heard funeral drums playing, the same ones from my uncle's funeral. I heard them like a dream, but I knew it wasn't a dream. I opened my eyes slightly when I heard crying next to me. A pale white face was descending toward me, crying. Then, the crying turned into laughter. I couldn't move my body, but I turned my eyes to look at my clock. It was 11 a.m. The funeral drums kept playing, and the entity continued laughing. I was in a state of sleep paralysis. Then, she got up from my bed, smiled at me, and slowly backed into the dark closet. Just as she disappeared into the closet, my bedroom door opened, and I saw my cousin walk in. He touched my shoulder, and suddenly I could move again. I looked at the clock. It was 1 p.m. That was strange, because I just looked at it and it was 11 a.m. My cousin told me they were picking me up to go fishing. I got up, grabbed my stuff, and left with them. That night, after our fishing trip, my cousins dropped me off at 10 p.m. I was exhausted. I showered, ate, and went straight to bed. As soon as I fell asleep, I heard crying and laughter coming from my closet. The closet door slowly creaked open. It was dark, but I could see something standing inside. All she did was giggle. Again, I was in a state of sleep paralysis. I would fall asleep, only to wake up again and hear her still giggling. In the morning when I woke up, my closet door was closed. It was just a dream. But I knew this wasn't just any dream. I had been seeing this woman repeatedly, and it had to mean something. I needed to tell my parents. That night the same thing happened. I was sleeping when I heard someone mourning over me. I opened my eyes. It was the same pale-faced woman. She was sitting on my abdomen. She held a handful of leaves and tried to force them into my mouth. I clenched my mouth shut and turned my head from side to side, trying to resist. Then she spoke. "Remember, you said if we couldn't be together, then you would die with me. Do you remember?" All the while, the funeral drums continued, and distant voices wept as if I were the deceased at a funeral. I thought I was going to die. Suddenly, my bedroom door flew open, and the woman sitting on my abdomen rolled off my bed and vanished. I saw my mother rush in and chase something toward the window. She flung open the curtain and started yelling and spitting at whatever she saw. I sat up as she turned on the light. I told my mother what had just happened. She said she and my father were sleeping when she thought my father woke her up, saying something was inside the house. At first, she thought it was my father standing in the doorway, so she followed him outside, but then he vanished. She turned back and saw my father still asleep in bed. Just as she was about to lie down again, she heard funeral drums playing in my room. That's why she came running. But as soon as she reached my room, the sound stopped. She told me that when she opened the door, she saw a black cat sitting on my chest. The cat then jumped off the bed, ran toward the window, and disappeared behind the curtain, even though the window was closed. My mother went and woke up my father, and they both came back to my room. Then they asked me, "Did you wash your hands after the burial?" I told them I hadn't. I had driven straight home. They scolded me, saying that was why something from the cemetery had latched onto me. My parents were able to get a lady shaman over the following day. I had to call in to work to take care of this matter and not let it drag on. My parents acted strangely. They invited the lady shaman over, but only included a few family members. It was a long shamanic ritual, during which I noticed the lady shaman arguing with something, or someone, on the other side. I clearly heard the shaman say, "You said your brother couldn't open it, so you had to open it for your brother. That's why he is your son and not your brother's son? Are you for real?" It was a long and bizarre ritual, and the elders watching already seemed to understand what was happening. Once the ritual was completed, the elders asked my parents if it was true that I wasn't my father's son, but my uncle's. My father admitted that it was true. Only my parents and grandparents had known, and no one had ever told me before. According to the shaman, during the burial, the ghost girl who came for my uncle saw me and thought I was the one who had made a promise to eat poison with her. Because of this, she followed me home. The ghost was my uncle's ex-girlfriend that committed suicide by eating poison leaves. But the shaman reassured me, saying there was no need to worry. She had already taken care of it. The elders then asked how it was possible that I was my uncle's son instead of my father's. My parents and grandparents explained that back then in Southeast Asia, they were poor. My father and mother had a complicated relationship which involved the families on both sides. But in the end, they were able to be together. However, my parents struggled to conceive. For 4 years, they searched for herbal remedies to help them have children. They even performed 2 shamanic rituals, but nothing worked. Then, they consulted a different shaman, who told my father that he would have many children. In fact, many children were already waiting to be born to my parents. But there was one problem. In order for my mother to conceive, a key was needed to open the gate for the children, and my father did not have that key. This means that, in order for my mother to have my father's children, she had to first have one child who did not belong to my father. According to the shaman, my mother was originally destined to marry someone else and have one child with him. After that, her husband was fated to die, and she would become a widow. However, fate had changed, and the man she was supposed to marry had already passed away. Someone had to open the gate for my parents' children to be born, but my father did not possess the key. The family made a secret decision. They gave money to my uncle, asking him to be the one to open the gate. At the time, my uncle was still unmarried, so it wouldn't cause any complications with a wife. My uncle did it. After that, my parents were able to have 6 children after me. That day, I found out that I was actually my uncle's child. As for the ghost girl, the shaman convinced her to go with my uncle. Since then, she has stopped haunting me. Thank you for listening. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.